So I called poison control one day and I said, if somebody ingested this, would it kill them? And she started, and I said, and I always start every conversation with, my name's Mary McKinnon and I write thrillers. This is my website. And I asked her this question about if ingesting this would kill someone. And she started laughing and she said, I'd love to help you, but I can't. I can tell you what to do if someone has, but then obviously they'd have to report that and whatnot, cases or whatever, however it works. And she said, but I can't give you advice on how to poison someone. Fair enough.
Story time with Stephanie Story.
I am art historical novelist Stephanie Story. Welcome to my show, Story Time, where I get to talk to other writers about their passions and their processes. I have been so excited for this conversation all day because this is the second time that this author has joined me on this show. Oh, crazy. She already has a new book out. I'm so excited about this conversation because her book that we talked about last time, You Will Remember Me, was one of my favorite books. When I read it, it kept me up all night long. And so I was so excited that she had a new thriller coming out. And it's already out. You can go get it anytime. It's called Never Coming Home. Welcome to the show, Mary McKinnon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm absolutely thrilled to be back. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, I love having you back. I got to rewatch our conversation in preparation for this. And it was so much fun to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't get to ask about that. And I didn't get to follow up about that. It was so much fun to prepare for a second conversation. So thank you for joining me. But before we get to all of that, most importantly, you have to tell my audience at home, you have to give them like the scoop on this book because the plot is fantastic yet again. It sucks you right in. It's got all kinds of drama. So please tell my readers at home a little bit about the book and the crazy marriage at the center of this. Okay.
Okay, so here it is, Never Coming Home in all its glory. My sixth novel, my fifth suspense, and it's the story of Lucas. The story is told by Lucas, who is feeling really rather smug because he's about to inherit a boatload of cash. He's very sad because his wife is missing, presumed dead, and his mother-in-law is dying of cancer. And poor Lucas knows that his wife is never coming home because he organized for a hitman on the dark web to get rid of her. So his outward sadness is all completely fake because he wanted her gone, because he wanted access to all of her money. The problem is that somebody knows what he did and they're onto him, and he receives a cryptic photograph with a cryptic message on the back. And now he goes from hunter to prey.
Oh, come on. It's so good. Like on the little like description, it was first comes love, then comes murder. Like I love it. Right. Like, I'm in, totally in. Okay, but do I need to worry about your marriage? Because that's all.
No, I've had that question a few times actually. No. Actually, this month, June, Rob and I will be married 23 years. It was all good. We're very happy. I have no plans on ordering a hitman, or I hope vice versa either, actually. So, no, we're good.
Okay, good. I assumed neither of you had a hit on the other one, but you never know. You got to ask.
That's true.
Okay. The last book, you were talking about the fact that the idea for that book came from a real life story, that you were reading about this skier, and there was this whole like amnesia story, right? That came from like an article you read. Did this one come from some like real life inspiration, or did you just wake up having a bad dream? Like where did this one come from?
Actually, this one was character driven. It was from the movies, because I love movies and books where you root for the bad guy or woman, even though you know that you shouldn't. There's just something about them that makes you almost want or completely want them to get away with what they've done. And I thought that was so fascinating. And I thought that would be really fun to write. And I wondered if I could create a character where I could bring the readers along for the ride and actually want him, Lucas in this instance, to almost get away with what he'd done to, or had done to Michelle. So it really was character driven. It was very different, because all of my other books, except for one, my very first one, had come from inspiration from news articles or something I heard on the radio, or, you know, a nice light story that I turned really dark. So this one wasn't that at all. It was character.
But you like to give yourself challenges. Like the last one was an amnesia story, which was turned out to be very difficult from a plot perspective. And this is an extraordinary challenge. Like I think of like Patricia Highsmith, right, who wrote from the perspective of a serial killer a lot with the Ripley series. It's a tough thing to do, to get people engaged with somebody who's who at least appears to be ultimately a bad guy. Yes. How did you overcome the problem? What kind of work did you have to do from like a structure standpoint to try to like front load the front so that the audience is in? What did you do? Like, that's really hard.
Well, I sat there for a while thinking, okay, so this is the story I want to write. And the plot came together relatively quickly. And then I started thinking about the character. And one of the main things for me was that he needed to be funny, because spending an entire book writing it or reading it in the mind of the villain can be really, really exhausting. So I've written, and you will remember me, there was one character, we shall not name names, who was up to no good, but it wasn't apparent right from the beginning. It was kind of midway through where things started to turn bad. But this was different. I mean, in Never Coming Home, you know from the back cover copy, even before you've read the first chapter, that Lucas is a bad guy. He's had his wife killed. And so I thought, well, okay, so humor is one thing that I can do. If I make him funny and wry and witty, and just his observations of the world, things that we might think, but would never say out loud and barely admit to thinking. If he actually voices those in a funny manner, maybe I can get the reader along for the ride. And I will have taken some and not all. I know that not everybody wants to read a villain's perspective, but that, I think humor went a really long way. And the other two things were, I gave him a dog. So he cares for this stray dog very much, this stray dog Roger, which goes a long way too, because it shows a different side of him. And that actually leads me nicely to the third point, which was his backstory. So it was really important for me to understand or develop who Lucas was when the reader, or is when the reader first meets him in the first chapter. Why is he doing this? Why is he the way he is? Because I find I love unlikable characters. I love reading villains' perspectives, unlikable characters, providing I understand why they're doing what they're doing and they're not just cartoony villains. If they're cartoony villains and they're too dimensional, then it doesn't really make much sense. You can't really get to grips with why they're doing what they're doing. Tom Ripley, you understand why. So I tried to take that kind of approach, you know, three-pronged: humor, animal, and then backstory. So Lucas is very charming. He's a con artist. He's very charming. He's very lovely. If you met him, if he were real, we should all be terrified. But if he were real, and you met him at a dinner party, for example, or at a pub or wherever, he'd be charming and lovely and very, very sweet, and not a threat to you at all, providing you don't have something that he wants.
How do you get into the character so does something that bad? Do you relate it to the time you stole a donut? Like, what do you relate it to in your own, or whatever? I'm not accusing you of stealing a donut. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you find that, I guess, that psychological answer in yourself? Because you have to relate to this person in some way, even though I presume you've never taken a hit out on anybody.
I have not. I have never murdered anyone or done anything like that of the sort. The best way I can describe this is that I have always been a rule follower. I was always the kid in class who handed her homework in early. I like being early. to whatever it is I'm doing. If my kids would come home with forms to fill in from school or whatever, they take them back the very next day, because I'm just, that's just who I am. I'm wired that way. And so shedding that and thinking, okay, I'm now the villain. If I order it, if I want to find somebody, if I want to kill my wife, how do I do that? What's the best way to do that? Thinking from the murderer's perspective. So it wasn't really relating it to myself. It was really putting myself in that situation, thinking, I have to now think like and pretend to act like a criminal. So, okay, I'd get a hitman on the dark web. Great. What do I need to do? I didn't visit the dark web, but I learned about it. I did not, that's just a step too far for me, but I read about it. I talked to people about it. I listened to podcasts about it. And then it was, okay, well, how would I pay for the services? Well, crypto, obviously. And how would I make sure I'm not going to get caught? And then I was thinking through all of these different steps that I would have to take if I were really implementing this, and then cross-check them with a detective sergeant and fellow author, Bruce Robert Coffin. He's my go-to guy to getting away with fictional murder. And I called him and I said, listen, this is the scenario. This is what Lucas is doing. And he gave me another few tips. And he said what he, as a detective, would be looking for. So I could build a few more things in. But at one point he got very quiet and he said, getting a bit worried now because you've really thought of almost everything. So yeah. So it was tremendous fun, because it's not real, it's not real. No one's getting hurt. This is all completely fictional. But it was a really interesting exercise and a stretch for me as an author, because typically in my book, something is happening to somebody, but they don't know who's doing it. Whereas in this one, yeah, there's the same setup. Someone's delivering notes to Lucas saying, I know what you did to your wife. He doesn't know who they are, but he's the bad guy. So it's not as if he can go to the police or ask for help or do anything. So that was really fun.
I just find it so interesting that you went out to other writers to get help on your stuff. Did that surprise you when you got into this business, that it has a collaborative aspect? You used to work in tech, which had to have been super collaborative. Did it surprise you that noveling actually ends up having some collaborative elements to it?
It did. I think actually that was the most surprising thing about my new career, because IT recruitment could be pretty cutthroat at times. The sales environment can be extremely competitive, and I find that this community isn't. We help one another all the time, and sure, we might see somebody get a great book deal or a movie deal and think, oh, I wish I had that, but we don't want to take it away from them. We just like it too. There's a difference. There's a difference. And so when and it's not just other writers. I mean, in Never Coming Home, there's a scene with paramedics, and I don't have any experience in terms of other than first aid, quick, put a band-aid on something, or there's a burn or whatever, something, a light burn. But otherwise, I don't have much experience at all. And it was a fellow author, actually. I asked him about the paramedic scene, and he gave me tons of advice, and read through the chapter, read through the scene, and gave me a few pointers. And then I asked him if he knew of an ER doctor, because the following scene is at the hospital, again in an ER, and I want it to sound authentic. And he connected me with a friend of his who's an ER doctor, not an author, but an ER doctor. And we spent his lunch break on the phone talking through the scenario. And he said, actually, this has been so fun because it's not real. Nobody's got hurt. I haven't had to treat anyone. It's just, this is what I would say, this is what would happen. And he was really happy to spend his lunch break talking about a fictional case. And I found that so often doing research that for Her Secret Son, I filled in a contact form on the website for a family lawyer. And I just said, I need somebody's advice for upstate New York family law. In return, I'd love to name a character after you in my book. And no word of a lie, within 5-10 minutes, I got a phone call from one of the senior partners whose name is on the firm. And he said, I see all of the requests that come in, and I saw yours, and I told everyone, that one's mine, I'm taking that one. And his name is in the book. He's a lawyer in the book called Mr. Harlan Gingold, which is just the perfect name ever, and that's his real name. And he was so helpful. And I always say to authors, and be interested in knowing if you found the same, if you have questions and you want to do research, just ask people, because I have yet to encounter one person who was a little bit wary of what I was asking, because it had to do with murder, and she didn't know me. But other than that, I've never found anyone, author or non-author, who's shut me down and said, I don't have time to talk to you. Everyone's so gracious and helpful. Do you find that too?
Well, I agree. I mean, I'm a historical. I was just thinking, I never would have thought I would get into a research conversation with a thriller writer. But so much of what you've talked about has been research, because so much of what I do is research, because I'm a historical novelist. So much of it is digging up files and then having to call somebody and go, I'm stuck, but you're the expert in this. What's the answer? And then they give it to me. And I have never had a historian saying, I'm not telling you that. They just to get excited that I'm interested in the same obscure, weird thing you're excited in. So.
Yes, exactly. And to share their knowledge, I called Vital Records for the book that comes out next year, called Vital Records in Maine, and asked them how XYZ works, and they talked me through it, and they were really, really happy to just share their knowledge and expertise. And I found that throughout. It's whether it's the only one that was a bit odd, it was funny odd, was poison control. So I called poison control one day and I said, if somebody ingested this, would it kill them? And she started, and I always start every conversation with, my name's Mary McKinnon and I write thrillers. This is my website. And I asked her this question about if ingesting this would kill someone. And she started laughing and she said, I'd love to help you, but I can't. I can tell you what to do if someone has, but then obviously they'd have to report that and whatnot, cases or whatever, however it works. And she said, but I can't give you advice on how to poison someone. Fair enough.
That's so great. I'm so glad poison control is looking out for all of us, though. They were not giving that information out.
No, she was not. She was quite apologetic about not being able to help. It was really quite funny.
Your chapters, like, they rip through, and at the end you're like, well, crap, Hannah, I can't put it down. I gotta keep reading. I gotta turn the page and keep going, because now you've left me at yet another moment where I gotta know what happens. That is extraordinarily difficult to do. It's one of the reasons why I read thrillers, right? It's to learn that kind of technique from thriller writers. So does that all come, my question is, does that all come from the plotting that you do beforehand, where you know where the chapter is going to sort of cliffhang and how you're going to do it? Or does some of that come when you're in the middle of writing and you go, oh, this is actually the place to break it that's more exciting? Like, where in the process do you do that? Because you are great at it. It's like,
oh, thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I've now written,
this is your sixth
books published, and I've written another 2. so I'm now working on my 9th, and I think because of that, I'm really aware that when I finish a chapter as I'm writing, even in the skeleton draft or after I've started editing, I'm already aware of, okay, so is this going to make the reader put the book down? Is this a place where they'll put the book down and go, oh, I'm tired, I can, or will they think, no, I'm tired, but I'm going to read another chapter until the book falls on my head because I fell asleep with it. So I'm already aware of it then, but then during the editing process as well, I'll come to the end of the chapter and I'll think, oh, that reads a bit flat. Can I go up a few paragraphs and move a bit down, or can I move something from the next chapter up? So generally I try and end every chapter with a question, maybe an answer, going somewhere, arriving somewhere, or something happening that makes you go, oh wait, what? And that's mini cliffhangers, I suppose. That's really the advice. My editor once said to me, do not give the reader a reason to put the book down at any time, really, whether it's during the chapter, but particularly at the end. Try and write something that will make them want to turn the page, even if they're deadbeat tired.
Right. And it's great. I mean, makes for great books, but also just like, it's like, I can't go to sleep yet, husband. You gotta wait one more chapter. Oh man. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason why I wanted to ask the question is because I have a lot of writers like who watch this show for like craft tips. And I think sometimes they think it all comes in like the planning process instead of realizing that some of that comes in revision, that you find as you go.
Revision's my favorite part. I mean, you too.
Yes.
The blank page. That's why I plot. There's multiple reasons why I plot, because if I didn't, I'd meander around forever and not know where I'm going, and that's just a waste of time for me. There are lots of people who don't plot and they write fantastic books, and hats off to them. But I'm not one of them. I need to have a plot. To at least think I know where I'm going. So it's just, I think the editing phase for me is where the magic starts to happen, hopefully. And the initial, what I call my skeleton draft, my puke draft, my just, rough and dirty, get it out and see if the plot works draft. I write that one quite quickly, and then I edit. And I'm finding that once I get to that stage, once I go back to chapter 1, I'm excited all over again to start editing it and going through it and adding bits. And then I might be on page 160 and think, oh, wait a minute. If I add this on page 52, that leads really nicely into that. And that wasn't there at the beginning. I had no idea. Because to be honest, if I plotted everything that's in my novel, I would just write the novel. I find it impossible to plot everything. It doesn't work that way for me. Again, for me,
I don't think it can. I mean, because novels are so big. That's what I think some people don't realize if they don't write them. They are giant things, and they keep going and they keep going, and there's so many subplots, and there's so much stuff that has to, particularly in a thriller. I don't really know how you would write a thriller without plotting and planning some, because the plots have to come together and work, and this one has to surprise this one, and it's just like the structure of them. They sort of need that. It's like historical fiction. I don't think you could write it without plotting it in some way.
People do, and I don't. Hank Philip Urian doesn't plot. Mary Kubica doesn't plot, and I'm in awe because I read their work, and I think that the thing is, for anyone watching to take away, is that there isn't one size fits all, that every author writes a little bit differently, and some plot, some don't, some plot a bit and then plot a bit more and write a bit more and plot again. Some people have tried plotting and decided it's not for them and go back to plotting as they write. Hank always says that she gets really excited to get up in the morning and find out what the characters are going to do, because she has no idea. I need to think all of that through. I'm working on the plot for the thriller for 2024 now, and I've been playing around with it. And once I've got the plot, then I'll start writing, because otherwise I just have no idea how would I get them to do anything, really.
That's really interesting. You have one that just came out, you have one that's coming out next year, and then you're plotting another one. So are you on a 1 book a year sort of schedule in your head?
Actually, next year I have 2. So so next year, funny thing happened earlier this year. I had written the thriller for 2023, which is about an anger management therapy exercise gone wrong, which I'm really excited about this one. Frankie ends up in anger management. Frankie works in construction. She ends up in anger management because of a situation with a male client. And she's tasked with writing a forgiveness list, a list of people she could work to forgive if she wanted to, which she doesn't, because she hates them all. And so she doesn't really worry all too much about the list itself when it goes missing in an Uber, until people on that list start getting hurt. And the main problem is, because again, she doesn't really like them, but she doesn't want to see them hurt. But the main problem is that her name is on the list. And she put it there because her past self is the person she can never ever forgive. So now she's in trouble. So that one comes out in the spring.
Good one. That's another great one. Oh, you're so good at these. I love it so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So I'd finished that one. I'd finished we'll call it the first draft that I sent to my editor, my agent. I'd finished that. And Never Coming Home was such a joy to write. And it was so much fun to write. And I had such a laugh because of the humor. Even though it deals with really dark stuff, it was funny for me to write. I really liked Lucas's sense of humor, and I laughed a ton. And I thought, oh, it was really fun to write something funny, even though it's dark, but funny. And it would be nice to do something like that, but how am I going to do that? And if I write something humorous and I'm writing a thriller, and then if it doesn't go anywhere, then am I wasting my time? So I didn't actually do anything with it. And then my agent calls. I had a couple of ideas of things that I might do, because I'd written a rom-com. I thought maybe I could write another rom-com, and I was just playing around with it. And my agent calls me and she says, how do you fancy writing a holiday rom-com? Have you got any ideas for a holiday rom-com? And I said, funny you should say that. Actually, yes. And so I wrote a holiday rom-com that was acquired by Putnam, and which will publish next fall, not this fall, next fall of 2023, under the name Holly Cassidy, so under a pseudonym.
You have a second author name. That's the best. That means you're putting out a lot of content, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So great. I love it how those kinds of things work. And I love hearing about all of that sort of second guessing that we all do as authors. We're coming up with this idea. No, maybe I don't want to do this idea. Should I do this? Is this one going to ruin my career? And none of that stuff matters if you're enjoying what you're doing.
Yes. Yes. And it was so much fun, honestly, writing the rom-com. I fear though, it's made me gone a lot even darker in the thriller for 2024. Because it would, wouldn't it? Because now I've had all the sweetness and light and Christmas stuff and hurrah and happy ending, and now
you're going to murder that.
That's right.
Awesome. Okay, I could talk to you for 800 hours. I'm out of time, so you'll have to come back some other time. I was going to ask you follow-ups about your first chapter fun, which is still going on, which is crazy.
Yes.
Where you read first chapters from other authors and you still share their work with Hank. Like,
yes,
that's crazy. It's still going on. I love it that you do that you support other writers. It's
Thank
fantastic.
you.
I had loads of questions about.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't get to any of that because this was too great. Okay, so we'll have to do it again sometime. Thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Can't wait for people to read this book. You're so fantastic. I love it. And you have a big fan here in your work, in your writing.
Well, likewise.
So, okay. Thank you so much for coming, Hannah. And we will do this again. And everybody else out there next time. Bye-bye.
Story time with Stephanie. Story time virtually. We've got time and plenty of stories, talking stories in a novel way. Story time with Stephanie.